Welcome to Smart Water Wednesdays. I'm Ben Coffey. I have with me Eric Haugen, who is with Landcare Management, a great landscape management firm here in Denver, Colorado. And Eric, thanks for making time to join us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. I appreciate it.
I am excited to have you. So Eric is, on top of all of the certifications that we were just talking about, is also a former board member of the big landscape industry show here in town called ProGreen, and current board member of the ALCC, the Associated Landscape Contractors of Colorado, our governing organization right next to the IA, right?
Yep, that's it.
You want to tell us a little bit about what the work that ALCC is doing before we get started?
Yeah, ALCC is a huge advocate in education, several development programs to try to grow the green industry, to try to create professionalism, really try to get everyone on the same team and to do work right. We really reach out to companies, large companies, small companies, basically anybody, and give them the resources to be a successful landscape company. They have mentorship programs and really just a great organization. You can see them on the news often. They'll come on and do different clips about what's going on in the weather, what we're expecting with the drought, etc.
Yeah, and speaking on behalf of water conservation and really water restrictions is where I see them stepping into the news, right? Every time we get new water restrictions, they have someone from the ALCC come on and describe what we're trying to accomplish and how we're trying to accomplish it. So they really do speak on behalf of the professional landscape organizations of Colorado. So yeah, good work there. And today we are going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is flow management. And specifically, we're going to zoom in on a feature of the weather track we call Mainline Break Alert. To me, this is by far one of the most important things that weather track does, because in terms of water conservation and water waste, I, as a landscaper, can tell you that this right here will cost you more water than anything else that can happen in your landscape. This will put a leaky faucet to shame. A mainline break is something that can cost thousands, if not millions of gallons of water. And so we are trying very desperately to prevent this from happening. And the way that WeatherTrack does that is through flow management, and specifically about this mainline break monitoring that we are going to detail in today's session. But I didn't tell Eric we were going to do this, but everybody has a great mainline break story. Everybody who's worked in irrigation for a while has seen this happen. Tell me your favorite mainline break story.
Oh boy, I don't know where to start. No, last week we had a technician that went out to a property, and they had a backflow preventer, and about, I don't know, 15 feet away, the main line would go out through the native area, and it was shooting up in the air. I don't know if it was as much as that picture, but we never go out to that native area because you don't see it, right? We only mow it one time a year. And so for some reason the tech saw that shooting up, and it was a mainline break. It was a T that was broken, and it was shooting up in the air. And a homeowner came out and said, "Well, yeah, that's been doing that for a while. I didn't know. I thought that was supposed to do that." Oops. So, but a better one is we had a property that was leaking out into a retention pond, and the retention pond was full, and everybody just thought the retention pond was supposed to be full. And we finally caught it. It was broken, just leaking in, filling it up, and it cost them, I think it was $126,000 for 1 month. And then they wanted us to pay for it, right? The contractor, it's our fault. We go out and break main lines on purpose, but so there's a couple to start with.
Man, that's brutal. I think my favorite one, when I was a tech, I was working for Jefferson County Public Schools, and we had one that we found on the water bill. They were suddenly getting exponentially higher water bills, and we went out and they're like, it has to be an irrigation break. We went out and looked, and nothing. We did a full system walk, nothing. We were out there for getting called back every week looking for this mainline break. And finally, we found a main line that had eroded down instead of up. So usually you're looking for the big geyser or the big sinkhole, but this one had eroded down right into a drainage gully and right into the drainage for the neighborhood. So the way that we found it was we turned it on. We were walking the site with a remote and we walked by the drain. And way upstream, we could hear the water dumping into the drain. And as we turned it on and off, we realized that it was our main line. So it cost the district thousands of gallons or millions of gallons, thousands of dollars. And it was just one that was so irregular because usually you get all the landscape damage that comes along with it. So these are things that I always say can cost the entire year of water savings, right? You can manage to weather-based irrigation and nickel and dime your water bill down a little bit each night by delivering weather-based irrigation. And then one mainline break can just suck all of that savings away. And so it really is one of the most critical things that we as irrigation managers need to keep an eye on. And we as high-level water managers want to battle against. So we will talk about kind of the details of the mainline break today and the mainline break alert. The mainline break alert is created when a flow measurement comes in higher than the mainline break threshold. Now, this is something that I really need to, this is the most misunderstood alert I have to believe, because it really does revolve around this mainline break threshold. We set a gallon per minute threshold that if it ever gets past, the mainline break alert is created. And when a contractor gets that alert, automatically, because mainline break is in the name and we're all so sensitive to it, they automatically go out looking for a mainline break. But that alert doesn't necessarily mean that the main line has broken. It definitely means that we measured more than the threshold will allow. So let's talk about how we get there. Let's not jump to conclusions. So when we are programming a mainline break alert, there are three things that we program in. There's the mode, the threshold, and the delay. So this is right off of weathertrack.net. And let's talk about each one of those things specifically. The mode is an important thing to understand because this tells us what the controller is going to do about the mainline break. So if you have your mode set to alarm and action, like we do here, that means that once the controller detects a mainline break, then it will follow the protocol. And I really like the protocol, and since we're detailing it today, I want to talk about kind of how this all works. Once the alarm is raised, what WeatherTrack does is assess whether that's actually a mainline break or not. To me, that puts the smart in smart controller, right? It really does an amazing job to identify what's happening out on site and try and deliver as much information in the alert notification as possible. This involves a two-stage response. So first, when the alert is raised, the first thing the controller does is shut down any stations that are running without closing the master valve. So we turn off all of the irrigation that's running, but don't immediately slam that master valve shut. And the benefit here is many, many times it is your irrigation system that pushed you past the limit. Maybe it was a stuck valve. Maybe it was a lot of breaks that just drove up your irrigation consumption on a station, that drove it past not only the station high flow alert, but way up past the mainline break. So the first thing we do is shut everything down that we can control and see if the measured value goes back down to 0. And if the measured value goes back down to 0, then we're going to still give you the mainline break alert, but we're going to pick back up. We're going to skip whatever it was running before. We're going to pick back up and continue irrigation. Something that you need to know about this: in your mainline break notification, it will tell you what station was running. It'll say, we expected a limit of 50 gallons a minute. We measured 70 gallons a minute when station 5 was running. And so if you see that station 5, that means that that's what was running, and you only passed through the first level of protocol. When we turned off station 5, everything went back to normal and we resumed irrigation. Now, if when we turn that off, water doesn't stop flowing and we don't get back down to 0, then we go into the second stage of the protocol, which is where we close the master valve and raise the notification. So if you're a contractor and you get a alert notification that says mainline break, in the alert notification, right next to station 5, for example, there would be an MV. That means that we had to close the master valve in response to this alert. And that means that it went into that second stage of the protocol. And when that happens, if you see that MV in your alert notification, that means we scrubbed the rest of the irrigation for the night. So that, to me, is some of the smartest stuff that the weather track does. I really appreciate this level of detail that it gives. Eric, when you get your alert notifications, what is it that you do to assess if you get a mainline break alert? What do you as a contractor do when you respond?
Yeah, the first thing, I mean, hopefully in a perfect world, it shut it down, right? We had the hydrometer, we had the master valve, shut it down. We send a technician out, and he'll go out and take a look. And you know, a lot of things with weather track or smart controllers you can do from the computer or from your office, but with those, we really need to go out and take a look at it, get our eyes on it, and see what's going on.
And one of the things that I advocate for, one of the best tests I see going on out in the field, is if you get that master valve notification in your alert notification, and we suspect that it really is a mainline break alert, WeatherTrack has a very handy tool that will help you test that mainline. It's called the master valve override. If you have a normally closed master valve, WeatherTrack will close that up during non-irrigation hours. So if you go out and turn on your master valve override, what that does is it opens your master valve without opening any other stations. And at that point, you can see if there's water running through the main line or not, right? You can tell if it's actually given way or if it was some anomalous behavior during irrigation, right? If you turn on your master valve override and it fills up that main line and then stops, then it's not actually a mainline break that you're dealing with. But if you turn on that master valve override and water starts pumping through and keeps pumping through, it probably will exceed the mainline break alert limit as well. So that is a troubleshooting tip. One of the tips and tricks that comes along with watching Smart Water Wednesdays. All right, so back to this. When we set up the mode, we can set up alarm only. This is if you want your system to tell you that it passed the threshold, but not deliver all that fancy response stuff. And I've seen this happen. This is a common thing. I always put the mainline break mode in alarm only when I'm running the learn flow test, because if I exceed the mainline break threshold and it takes action on the flow test, then it'll shut down your flow test. And sometimes if you don't know the limits of your stations, sometimes you have stations that are bigger than the default limits. So that's how I use that. I don't generally recommend leaving your mainline break mode in alert only, because if something breaks, it's just going to let it run. That's no bueno. And then off is obviously off. It won't even provide the alert. It just stops looking for this alert. And I like this little cheat sheet that talks about the thresholds. This is all of the different thresholds in the WeatherTrack program, but it gives you a good idea of where the mainline brake lives on this kind of hierarchy. We set that mainline brake threshold 10 to 20% above the highest anticipated flow. So if I'm only running one station at a time, I look for my biggest station and I set my mainline brake threshold to 20% above that, right? So if I run my biggest station at 100 gallons a minute, I set my mainline brake threshold to 120 gallons a minute. And normal irrigation shouldn't pass that, right? We shouldn't ever exceed that 120 gallons a minute during normal irrigation. If valves stick, if two stations are running at once or something happens, it could push up past that mainline brake threshold. That's the important lesson, is it doesn't always necessarily mean that it's a mainline brake. It means that we passed a measured value that passed this mainline brake threshold. It gets a little trickier when you are running more than one station at a time, because we have to anticipate that. We have to calculate the highest anticipated flow. So if you have two stations running at once and they're both at 100 gallons a minute, you can't set your mainline brake to 120 gallons a minute, because natural irrigation would push you to 200 gallons a minute. So again, if you've got two running at the same time at 100 gallons a minute, we add those together to give us our highest anticipated flow, and then set your mainline brake threshold to 20% above that. And then the delay is the time that we allow the system to balance out as stations transition from one to the next, right? Because in a irrigation system, everything is dynamic, everything is moving all the time. And so as I turn off station one and turn on station two, there's inevitably a spike in usage. The measured usage goes way up because sometimes station one is slow to close. Sometimes the pipe from station two has drained out and there's pipe fill that has to happen, and that drives up your irrigation. So we set the delay to let the system balance out before we test on a station. And so definitely something to keep an eye on is if you know you have an older system like the ones that we find on Eric's HOAs, sometimes we have to adjust this delay because the valves are so slow that it's causing false alerts, right? You get stuck in a pattern of chasing alerts that aren't really alerts because the system isn't fast enough to beat the delay. So WeatherTrack comes with a 3-minute default, but you can bump that up to as much as 6 minutes on an alert. All right, Eric, this is when I'm bringing back in. Sorry to talk over you as a guest, but
well, I'm learning as you're going. So
that's all the details and some of the common scenarios, right? We've talked about. And most of the time, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a mainline brake, but that's what we always want to be vigilant about. We always want to make sure that it's not that. But any sort of broken components can drive you past that measured flow value, that threshold, right? It just is a limit that gets passed. And so any sort of brakes, lateral brakes can do that. Stuck valves can do that. Broken heads. Do you have any tips or tricks on responding out and things that people should look for when they're responding to these brakes?
No, I think it's like irrigation troubleshooting, right? You always start at one point and you move forward. And so, I mean, like you're talking about, mainline brake is when you're going to lose the most water. So a lot of times they're the most identifiable. And so it's like you said, overriding that master valve and then turning it on, see where the water's starting from the beginning. And then, you just have to get your eyes on the property and walk around and see if it's a stuck valve. It's pretty evident a lot of times with this, but I think we see a lot of the alerts when we have the broken heads, when we have it set for the lower thresholds on the zones. But yeah, I guess the best thing I can answer is you always just start at one point and you work your way out.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing to be aware of, and this is with LC and Pro 3 controllers. It's a little bit different for OptiFlow, but with the LCs and the Pro 3s, manual irrigation can happen on top of scheduled irrigation. And so your schedule could be running, and if you show up to test the system and start running stations manually, WeatherTrack's going to allow you to do that. And that might push you up past your mainline break alert limit, and then shut your master valve down, and all of a sudden the water stops and you're testing. So just be aware that that can happen, right? If more is running than you know about, you can prompt that mainline break alert. Also, for new questions, or for new users, for new WeatherTrack flow installations, one of the most common things I see on new installations is a mismanaged installation. And so if your flow sensor has turbulence on it, it hasn't been installed to the proper specifications. If your flow sensor hasn't been installed to the proper specifications, it can cause the water in the pipe to swirl. We call that turbulence. And what that does on your flow sensor is spin it way faster than it expects to spin, or way faster than a nice, even, smooth, flat flow of water would cause. And so turbulence can cause mainline breaks. So something to keep an eye out for when you're new at this. Make sure that your flow sensor is reporting accurately, because you'll see those mainline breaks pop up. Also, interference, electrical interference. If you've got electricity coming across your flow sensor wires, that shows up as extra pulses on the wire and can drive your usage like way up. And so that's why we always use the right kind of wire, or obey the rules of electrical installation for those flow sensors. And then last but not least, of course, could be an incorrect setting. If we didn't set that mainline break alert to the right threshold, that's something that we want to keep an eye on. So when we are troubleshooting, like Eric said, you start at the beginning and walk through. If you turn on the master valve override, that will help you. The information on the display will help you, right? You can see what your flow sensor is measuring there, right on the panel, right on the face of the controller, and it'll tell you how many gallons per minute your flow sensor is measuring. So make sure that you're starting at the beginning, you're turning on that master valve and watching the number first. And if it continues to spin, you're going out, walking the main line and looking for places that water might be disappearing. Keep an eye out for on-site management, right? If you've got hose bibs or quick couplers, easy to pass the limits with those things. If you plug in one too many quick couplers, you can pass that mainline break threshold in a heartbeat. All right, so Eric, I'm coming back to you because I have a question I've got to read through. Let me see. First of all, tell me, when you are out on site, have you ever used manual irrigation and shut the whole system down because of a mainline break alert? Have you ever pushed the system past its capacity?
I'm sure I have several times. Yeah. And that's when I use that last bullet point, call customer service. What just happened? Yeah.
So I have a question. I think this is from South Africa. Let's see, the value proposition. Let's see, they are asking for a simple definition of the mainline break alert. And the most simple definition of the mainline break alert, just to recap, is that we set a system-wide threshold. We call that the mainline break threshold. And if our measured usage ever passes the system cap, the top of our expected usage, then it will prompt a mainline break alert. Once your measured usage passes your mainline break threshold, then it will give you that mainline break alert, and it can be any one of these issues that we're talking about. All right, sorry for that. Eric, we are zooming in on the end of this session. And for all of my first time guests, we always hammer them with the same question. What does WeatherTrack save you?
What does WeatherTrack save me? I have a lot of answers for that. Number one, of course, I haven't always been a huge advocate and worried about saving water, but number one, it saves water. I think the biggest thing as a business owner, as a water manager, is it saves me time, it saves me heartache, because I know with my clients that we're going to be watering properly. It's difficult to find irrigation techs that adjust the system accordingly to the amount of water it should put out, right? We always put 20 minutes on sprays or 40 minutes on rotors, or we can't get to a property in time before a heat streak comes in. And so I know, and I have the confidence that my properties are going to look good. They're going to have a healthy landscape, and we don't have to do anything, no matter who's touching it. We still need to get out and work on the broken heads and do that stuff, right? But third and final, and this again is from a business owner standpoint, is we make a lot of money off of these controllers because it's saving the efficiency on the irrigation techs. They don't have to go out to a controller and do a 2-minute test and run all over the place and miss a zone. We're offering value to our clients, so they stay with us. They see we're doing the right thing at the property, right? And we're doing a good job, and they feel comfortable with us. It builds the relationship. We're saving water, we're saving them money, and we're making money so we can stay in business. So I love them. It took me years and years to get really excited about smart controllers, but when I really got familiar with WeatherTrack, I love it. It's one of the favorite things I have in my job, and it's exciting. It took me a long time. I've been doing it for 25 years, and we had some failures with smart controllers, but now with WeatherTrack and the simplicity and getting all my team on board, all my techs on board, I love it. So it saves me heartache, it saves me money, it brings some excitement back too.
That's awesome. What a great answer. And that brings me to, I had one more. Let me look. I got another question. Oh, yes. So it is like an automated stop loss. A WeatherTrack or a mainline break will stop irrigation from running during non-irrigation hours, during irrigation hours. Anytime you pass that mainline break threshold, it is an automatic stop. It works in conjunction with your master valve to make sure that, that we're not just sending water down the gutter. All right, so let me bring back what we have coming up. Always like to plug the customer support, our dedication to your success, and all of the resources that we dedicate to that in terms of 6-day-a-week bilingual customer support at the 800 number, as well as at support@hydropoint.com. You can call, you can email. We also have some great online resources. If you're someone who learns by reading, we've got a library of documentation, all of the tech specs, all of the getting started guides. And then if you like what you see here, you might like our training program. I head up all of our training endeavors for WeatherTrack, and I've got on-demand certified free training through LearnUpon. And so lots of resources there to learn more if you're interested, including a great one online called Managing Your WeatherTrack Alerts that talks about all of this stuff. All right, and that brings us to next week, when we will have one of my friends, Paul Bassett, who I work with on the Denver Public Schools project, and he works on water efficiency projects around the country. Very high profile water manager who is really in the sustainability space. He really focuses on the sustainability conversation and kind of is a salesman to those sustainability managers. So we're going to talk about where irrigation became a sustainability manager's issue, how irrigation turned up on the radar of all of the nation's sustainability projects. So I'm excited about that. Paul is a very smart guy and going to be an awesome guest. Eric, thank you so much for making time for us this morning. I really appreciate your insight, and I definitely we'll take you up on that beer later today.
We'll make it a couple. Thanks for having me,
Make it a
Ben. I
couple.
appreciate it.
If you're still awake at that time, I know that
right.
based on our earlier conversation, sleep is a greater commodity than beer. So good luck with the newborn life, and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Ben. See you guys.
See you next week, everyone.